I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Trip Odenheimer, and I am really excited today to have with me Shaun Lake. He's the co-founder of Bubs Naturals. Sir, welcome to the Shadows.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad we can make this work. I love the product. I love it. We were just talking about it before I hit record. I'm telling you, folks, those apple cider vinegar gummies are so addicting. You have got to check them out. I'm not just sitting here making like a shameless plug because he's the guest on the show. I'm talking about he's got some legit products. And this is coming from. Go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, and I mean, I could joke with everyone if they're only listening to audio right now. You might be stuffing your face with them as we speak.
Exactly,
just plowing them down.
I was telling my wife this morning when I was taking a couple. I said, I don't know if I think I already took 2 of these, but I'm going to take 2 more right now. But yeah, they're awesome product. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But before we get started, I'm going to put you through the same 5 rounds presented by a sponsor, Giant Worldwide. Head over to giant.tv/shadows. Check out their leadership seminar. First question for you, sir. Has anyone ever approached you thinking you were someone else?
Yes.
Who?
Oh, I got to answer who. Shoot. What was that actor's name? Oh, it was someone incredibly good looking. And I don't remember. I just remember being like, really? Oh, all right. I'll play this one up.
All right, thanks.
My wife is a newscaster, so she gets recognized all the time. And so she's on Fox News San Diego. And so we go out and she gets recognized. Oh, Heather Lake. And I'm usually the arm candy around that. And I remember getting recognized once. And now you just put me on the spot. I don't remember who it was, but I'm going to say it was someone incredibly good looking, an actor. And I was flattered.
Okay, there we go. What 3 things would you leave in a time capsule for people to open in 50 years?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug a jar of Bubs Naturals collagen protein because I want them to be as healthy as I have been. I believe you got to have a little bit of fun out there. So I'm going to say a well-crafted IPA. And I want them to have the kind of fun I've had in my life. So I would leave them a full snowboarding kit, head to toe.
I think the snowboarding kit would probably age the best in 50 years out of those 3.
The IPA is going to be absolute dog shit, but it's the principle. You have to work hard and you deserve to play hard.
There we go. What do you do when you want to get out of your own head?
Fitness, 100%.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate level set on anything you need to do in life. I memean, it's an active meditation. I meditate. I'll be clear about that.
Yep.
But when I want to get out of my own head and guarantee that space, go rip out a 5K, 5-miler, go sling some weight at the gym, and your task priority, and you absolutely can clear that headspace.
Yep. That is mine too, is working out. If someone assigned you a random job to start, what's the worst career they could give you?
I'm going to say my very first job that I ever took, I was a baker's assistant.
Really?
And you are sweeping the floors, you're cleaning the toilets. You might graduate if you're lucky to measuring some flour, and it's just messy and sticky, and you're literally just doing everything everyone else doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, there's some glory in it because you learn how to bake muffins, but it takes you 6 months to learn the recipe to bake the muffins.
Okay. Final question for you. What book recommendation do you have for our listeners out there?
I'm going to go with a plug to a book called Driven by a guy named Dr. Douglas Brackman.
Okay.
And I have learned an absolute ton about this book. I'm not going to say it's written in the most poetic English, but I will say that it is an absolute blueprint for things that are very recognizable to those of us that have maybe walked to a slightly different drumbeat in our lives, and how to harness a lot of the energy around getting the most out of making decisions, facing fear, and being downright productive. It's a great look in the mirror for me, and it's a great roadmap forward.
Okay.
A lot of people can read that book and gain a ton of insight from it.
We will have that book listed under our book recommendations on our website. And you survived 5 rounds. So now we're going to jump into your story. Tell to us about your upbringing. You grew up in, was it Gloucester, Massachusetts? Am I right with that?
You are correct. So, A Perfect Storm, the Sebastian Younger book. Maybe I should have made that my book. That was based on my hometown of Gloucester, Massachusetts. It's this really eclectic little fishing village and artist community. So very blue collar, and very artistic at the same time. So my dad was a fishmonger. He was in the fishing industry. Folks, actually today, a more relevant one would be like that TV show Wicked Tuna. That is also based out of Gloucester. It's really well known for its tuna fishing. So a little bit north of Boston. And then when I was in the fourth grade, I moved to Winchester, Massachusetts, which is a suburb just outside of Boston. Paul Revere, Lexington. It's right in that whole little zone there. And that's where I really kind of like had my formative years, graduated high school, all that good stuff. So I'm an asshole at heart.
And I hear you weren't into sports. You were in like, the typical like football, basketball, skateboarding kind of caught your eye, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was into sports. I just wasn't terribly good at them.
I had
And
that
I think I had a
problem.
really hard time socially adjusting to team sport environments. So I did all the sports. Like I played Little League baseball. I sucked at it and I got made fun of. And I kind of like it pulled me away from it because I just wasn't, my headspace wasn't there. And I always kind of gravitated towards track, tennis, swim team. So I was always on a team. But at the end of the day, what I found was that anything that I found that was individual based on my merit and achievement, I was more drawn to.
Hmm.
So I tried out for the football team and, I never really clicked with the guys on the team, and it's a team sport. So,
Yeah.
I never had the confidence to really rally it. I could run fast, but I didn't have the confidence to like really catch the ball and show what I was made of. And, I think a lot of that probably had to do with the fact that my parents had gotten a divorce.
Oh, wow.
Um, I was going through that. So when I moved to Winchester from Gloucester, it was because my parents split. So, fourth grade kid, your
That's
head's a
rough.
scrambled mess. Like you're figuring it out, being raised by a single parent. And that was back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, different time. That was
You're about
40
10
years
years old.
ago. Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
you're a 10-year-old kid and you're just trying to figure it out. So going into high school, when I discovered punk rock music, I discovered skateboarding, I discovered all these counterculture things that were far more accepting to me than how hard it was to work at being popular and being with the in crowd and being, kind of marching down the middle of the road. Like I was like, oh, if I just, play the black sheep role, like, man, that feels really right to me. And there you go. It spoke to me. And skateboarding was a byproduct of that. Like it kind of came out of that.
Yeah. How did snowboarding come into it?
Well, I mean, I lived in Winchester, Massachusetts. You have incredibly cold winters. So my mom, as a single mom, was always looking for activities to help keep us kids out of trouble. Very smart move, because if you leave a kid with too much idle time, they're going to find trouble.
Oh, yeah.
I'm now have that blueprint out for my 4-year-old son, my 4-year-old daughter, my 6-year-old son. So I'm like, yeah, I got to keep these kids moving.
Especially before
Um,
phones.
oh, hands down.
Yeah.
So for me, my mom said, hey, we're going to take you skiing. So my older brother, younger sister, I'm the middle child. We used to go up to Vermont and New Hampshire every weekend, and it would ski, ski, ski. Well, when I discovered skateboarding, this was in the 1980s. So right now, everyone's tuned into the Olympics and watching Shaun White and Team USA and Chloe
Yep.
Kim. Like, you're watching this phenomenal evolution of the sport. I discovered snowboarding from a skateboard magazine while I was a skier. So, I'm 15 years old. I love skiing because that's what I know. My mom is, it kind of brought me into that sport. And again, individual sport, right? I was
Yeah.
drawn to it. And all of a sudden I realized that there's some sort of skateboard version of skiing. And I was like, I got to try this. So we're going up to Killington, which was our home mountain. My mom bought a little house in Killington, and Killington did not allow snowboarding. So here I am now. I'm 16 years old. I think I'm a junior in high school. And all I want to do is snowboard. My mom's like, come on. The whole family's going to Killington, and she's got to drop me off at this little resort next door to it called Pico. And I got to go to Pico or Pico, whatever it was called. and I would go there and snowboard all day and then come back around and then join the family. So it was like, again, that little rebellious streak on display as a teenager, but I was super passionate about it. I just started drinking the culture in, because, these sports have a culture wrapped around them, and I was just totally drawn to it. And I don't think I could have predicted then that I would try and turn it into a career, but I definitely wanted to do it. It's all I wanted to do.
Yeah. Total sidebar. One of the most embarrassing moments in my life is I went with my youth group skiing, and I didn't believe in going, swerving when you ski. I just believed in tucking it and going straight down.
My man.
And I'll never forget this mountain called Rebel Yell. And the name says it. And I started taking off, and next thing I know, my ski was in one spot. My glove, never found one of my gloves, but I crashed and burned pretty hard, and everybody else just went by me like, "Are you okay?" Yeah. Like, just, it was rough. But okay. And then, so from there, you ended up in New Mexico, right?
Yeah. So you did some homework there. So I decided,
we do our research here.
Yes, you do. So I decided to go to college at the most punk rock spot that I could find. So I'm 18 years old, I'm a senior in high school, I'm applying to colleges. And I was like, well, I'm going to apply to colleges where I don't have to write an essay, because I don't want to write an essay because I'm being punk rock. In hindsight, it was.
Is that like the entry essay?
Yeah, it's like the entry essay. Like, you're going to write about yourself. Yeah. I didn't want to write about myself. I didn't want to tell anyone anything about me. So I ended up going to college in Las Cruces, New Mexico, to New Mexico State University. And to me, I was like, this is the punkest thing I could do, is go move to basically the middle of the Old West. And I knew nothing about it. I just knew that it was the absolute opposite of anything my parents would want me to do, but it met the criteria of going to college.
Yeah.
And I'm actually so glad I did it, because I learned a bunch about that part of the country, about the Southwest. It's about an hour outside of El Paso, Texas. So it's right on the El Paso, New Mexico border. Yep. It's where Billy the Kid would hold up. So Old Messiah and, like that movie Young Guns, all that was just coming out when I was a freshman in college. So it was like the most popular movie, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, that's Phillips, your town."
Yeah.
All those cats. And that was the movie. It had nothing to do with why I chose to go there. In fact, I didn't even know it until I was there, that was part of that history. So it was cool, but really I was just doing it for rebellion purposes. So my freshman year in college, I had a GPA of about 2.65, right? That's the equivalent of about a C+ grade point average. In other words, I was phoning it in. Yeah. My mom knew it. My dad knew it. They weren't together, but everyone knew it. And so I went home from college that year, and I sat down with my best friend, Glen Doherty, who I went to high school with, middle school with. We knew each other from Winchester, and my brother, and everyone's kind of talking about hey, maybe we should take a year off. Maybe we should go do something different, and have this adventure. And so we hatched this plan. And I remember sitting down with my mom and telling her, I'm going to go move to the mountains of Utah, and I'm going to go become a professional snowboarder. And my mom was like, huh. Okay, well, what I can't tell you is you're wasting all of my money right now. So you better go do something and figure it out, because anything you do is going to be better than pissing away your education.
Right.
And she was completely right. My dad gave me the ditch digger speech and just looked at me and said, "You're going to drop out of college, huh? Well, the world needs ditch diggers too." And I'm like, "Thanks, Dad." But what he didn't know what he was doing is he was motivating the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
To make that drive to snowboard that much better. I definitely attribute a portion of my drive to him in a backhanded way, right? He was basically saying that's the most fucked up thing you could possibly do with your life. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and prove you wrong. So Glenn and I moved to Utah and embarked on this drive, and my older brother Guy, and we went out there. My brother just went for a year, and then he went back to college and had followed a more traditional, conventional route. Glenn and I, the college dropout life really suited us. That adventurous life, that let's go and, have adventures it was in our DNA. And we've always had that in common going back to high school. That's why we became best friends. So
Was Glenn in
You know, it was,
college for a year before as well?
yeah, Glenn went to Embry-Riddle flight school out in
Okay.
Prescott, Arizona. So he was actually not that far from me. I was in New Mexico. He was in Arizona. So
You
we
had Young
actually
Guns, he had
flew back
Tombstone.
and forth. There you go.
Yeah.
Bingo. So we both went up to Utah, decided that was the jam. You know, fast forward a couple of years and I got endorsed for snowboarding. I did well at some regional contests, got noticed by a sponsor, and kind of gradually worked my way up through it. And I always joke with people and they're like, "Oh, you were a sponsored snowboarder." I'm like, "Yeah, I was sponsored. I was a light pro." Like, what does that mean? I'm like, "Well, you got guys like Travis Rice, right? Those are like A-list pros. Todd Richards, A-list pro. I was getting paid like $500 a month. So I thought I was like high on, I was like the bee's knees. Like when I was making like $1,500 a month, I was like, I have made it.
Yeah.
And think about that in today's dollars, right? Right. Like I always had to work, but it paid for college when I went back. It paid for like my ability to reapply myself and re-engage at school. So I'm grateful for my time snowboarding and just the adventures around it. But that was my dream, was like, I want to get in magazines, because there were things called magazines back then. And that was like the measuring stick of, yeah, exactly. But in the 90s, being a sponsored snowboarder was like, hey, you were on video parts and you did some contests. That wasn't as big a deal, but you were in print magazines.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then my best friend, Glenn, was trying to become a pro skier. So we had this great group of friends in Utah that were like a couple, sponsored snowboarders, some pro skiers, and they were just our buddies. And Glenn was trying to fight his way through, and like he got coverage in magazines and he was an incredibly good athlete. But, the ski industry was really tight back in the 90s. He didn't make it. And I made it for my part. So, we're turning 25 and we're going, all right, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? All of our high school buddies have graduated college. Half of them are married. They all have real jobs. And you got Glenn and I are washing dishes, ranch hands. We're, painting houses in the summer, banging nails, whatever it takes to keep the dream alive. And Glenn's like, well, I think I'm going to join the Navy and become a Navy SEAL. I'm like, what? You're going to do what? Like, what's it? Like that Charlie Sheen movie?
Yeah.
That we rented on VHS? Like that thing? And he's like, yeah, man, like I met some Navy SEALs when I was down in Costa Rica, because he went on some surf trip, of course. And he's like, they just kind of got in my head and said I had what it takes. And I was like, that's amazing. I have no interest in that whatsoever, because I'm a sponsored snowboarder. Like I've got my world set in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a big sit down of what's next, because we both believed in that. Like I knew I couldn't snowboard forever. Glenn knew he couldn't ski forever. And when we looked forward at like the ski bums that were in their 30s and 40s, we were like, it doesn't look so good. So Glenn joined the Navy, signed his paperwork, and literally next thing I know, I'm going to his Bubs graduation, and I'm the pro snowboarder who hangs out, and all of a sudden I'm hanging out with a bunch of Navy SEALs. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was completely impressed with that world. Like, holy shit. And those guys, funny enough, are actually fairly impressed with guys that do action sports. There's a lot of similarities between the cultures. Like, I guess they're both batshit crazy, taking a bunch of chances, right? So
it's like, it makes sense when you say it. Yeah.
And so we just always got along, and Glenn's friends became my friends. Anyways, I ended up going back to college. Snowboarding had given me enough revenue to be able to do that. And that was my end game. My end game was graduate from college. And I got news for the world out there. When you go back to school after dropping out of school, chances are your parents are not going to pick up the tab for round 2. That's on you. So I'm really grateful for snowboarding to give me enough money to pay for my books to go back to school. And when you pay for college, you sit in the front row.
You don't phone it in no more.
You do not phone it in, because it is your dollars at work.
Yep.
And I'm grateful for that experience too. So a little tough love from the parents actually went a long way. So I graduate college at age 30. My best friend lives in Coronado and is a Navy SEAL. And my post-career path plans totally changed. I had left all my sponsors. I quit everyone because I knew, like, hey, I am way too old to be doing this at 30. That's like old man in snowboarding. And the next wave of snowboarders coming up were a lot better than I ever was. Mm-hmm. So I was like, it's time to move aside. And that next generation comes in, and I end up getting recruited by Burton Snowboards specifically to move to San Diego, California, where my best buddy Glenn is, and become the team manager of a young kid named Shaun White.
Probably heard of him.
Maybe heard of him.
Especially right now.
Maybe about to do some historical stuff
Yeah.
at the Olympics this year. And it was cool. Like he was 15, 16-year-old kid at the time. This was 20 years ago. So I worked with Shaun and his family in Burton, and that was my immersion into the business side of the action sports kind of youth lifestyle world. And then my best buddy is in the Navy. And so I always had this little hybrid of my surf buddies, my snowboard buddies, like that, those cultures, and then a big, strong tranche of military folks. So it's just always been in my space.
What does team manager for Shaun White look like? Like, what is that? I'm trying to wrap my head around what that consists of.
So we jokingly used to call it fluffing. So fluffing is, I think we all know what fluffing is. I do not need to go into great descriptions for that. But effectively for Shaun, it was make sure he's in the right headspace to go and do what he needs to do. So I've got a great friend, Mike Hazel. Mike went to the 2008 Olympics in Beijing for javelin. And Mike akined his most successful moments in javelin to when he would just push print. He didn't think, he didn't do anything. He just relied on the auto mechanics of what he had already learned. Same thing in snowboarding. You know what to do on the jump. You know the rotations. You know where you have to land, but you just have to just push print. And a lot of that team management was just giving them the confidence and the great headspace to go and do what they already know how to do. He already knew how to win the event, but actually knowing it and pushing print and doing it are two very different things. So a team manager helps with that. I believe a good team manager does that. There was a lot of team managers that just showed up to the events on a free credit card ride and drank their faces off and had a big party because that was always, that's built into the culture. But you help those athletes, then you make sure the camera guys are paying attention to them, the photographers. You're creating media opportunities. You're pairing an athlete with a product. So you might be working on a product with a rider and making sure like it fits a niche within the company. I felt like being at Burton, quite frankly, was like being at grad school. I learned a ton about product marketing, how much they cared about real rider input into the product life cycle. And then getting those riders to be the best ambassadors for the brand that they could be. And you develop these great friendships along the way in doing so. And so that's effectively what it was. I traveled all over the United States with Shaun. We developed product together. There were magazine interviews that I would pair him with. I would work with other team riders at photo shoots and video shoots, and you're creating content to then promote the athlete and by association, the brand. And that was a phenomenal experience.
Oh, I bet. Wow. That's pretty cool to hear. What's something about Shaun White? Like one little interesting little tidbit that you're like, people may not know this.
I think everyone knows how insanely competitive he is.
Yeah.
And that is 100% on display like this year.
Yeah.
He's always been that way. 20 years I've known him. He is competitive. He is looking at how to win. And it is like, it's just ingrained in him. It could be off-putting, I guess, if you're not competitive, maybe you're intimidated by that, but that just plays to his strengths.
Yeah.
That would be one thing that I would say, is absolutely, like you can look at that and see that nature. Some people don't know about him. He's also incredibly mischievous. Like he's got mischief all over him.
Really?
He would fuck with me back then, and I'm sure he does his own version of it today. So like he'd be the kid who would like poop and not flush the toilet. He knows to flush the toilet, but he wouldn't flush the toilet. Then I got to walk in and be like, oh God.
Yeah.
But he'd do it on purpose. Like he's messing with you. So that playfulness is absolutely still in him today. So maybe no one needs to know the poop story, but now it's too late. So
yeah, exactly. Now it's already recorded. So, and well, after that, you and we appreciate that on here. You were at what, DC Shoes for quite some time. Right?
So I left Burton and then I immediately rolled into ESPN, helping them with their X Games property. So I was like early on in the X Games, like kind of evolution. I worked briefly with Tony Hawk on one of his secret skate park tours. And from that, I jumped into DC Shoes and I was there for 6 years. So that was a big part of Quicksilver. And that was like taking everything I learned from working at Burton, my time as an athlete, what I saw from ESPN. Like it was a culmination of all of that into being the sports marketing director for DC. And I was hired in to oversee snowboarding, surfing, motocross, BMX. And then about halfway through my time there, Ken Block, who was my boss, decided to become a rally car driver. And then there was that whole evolution into rally, which is now, if you are into rally or Hoonigan or any of that stuff, like it's its own world.
Yeah, your story up to this point is just, I mean, the people that you are rubbing elbows with and the opportunities that are just unfolding in front of you are crazy. And the next part I want to ask you about is, it's my dogs sit here barking because my daughter's walking in the door. But talk to us about, you mentioned Glen earlier.
Yeah.
Take us back to 13 Hours, you know, the movie made by Michael Bay. People that have seen that, you know, they understand the story, but talk to us about where you were when you heard the unfortunate news about Glen.
Yeah. So Glen served 10 years at SEAL Team 3, right? And his last year, he moved up to Encinitas. So now we're in the same town. Glen gets a divorce. I get a divorce. We're two guys turning 40 that are become roommates. And all of a sudden we're like full midlife crisis, right? Like, oh, what are we going to do next? And I was working at DC. And it's funny, I used to bring Glen around to like X Games events and all the parties and all like the big things like, hey, meet Travis Pastrana, Travis, meet Glen. Like everyone knew each other. That was like how small the world was. But Glen had a job when he got out of the Navy because he needed to make ends meet. He got a divorce, a lot of payments, a lot of money. It's a lot of overhead in his life. And so he decides to start contracting for the Central Intelligence Agency, the GRS agent. So private security for CIA operatives all over the world, Beirut, Mexico City, but predominantly heavier zones. Like, I remember when he got stationed in Yemen once, and he's like, called me from a sat phone. He's like, I'm in a country that rhymes with the name Lemon, but I can't tell you where it is. That was his sense of humor. Like, he's always funny about that. And he would call me as his roommate to make sure I wasn't killing the house plants. Are you taking out the trash? Have you killed any plants? Take care of the fucking house. Like, all that stuff. Because at his heart, he loved the domestic connection to home and his friends and his family. Like, that was very important to him. It was very grounding in that line of work. But Glen was a GRS agent, so he was gone half the year, like 2 months here, 2 months there, great pay. I mean, he literally made 3 times as much money out of the Navy than when he was in the Navy. That's also kryptonite because it's very paralyzing to make almost $200,000 a year and then figure out what you're going to do next. So fall of 2012, Glen goes on what is supposed to be his very last deployment to Tripoli in Libya. Now, this is right after the fall of Gaddafi. And Glen goes over there and he's going to help CIA operatives, secure shoulder-fired missiles or something like that. And he goes over there. He just broke up with his girlfriend. And I'm talking to him on email, like, he's like, hey, check in on my girl. Like, make sure she's okay. Like, again, he's a funny cat. So he'd be like, make sure she finds a boyfriend while I'm gone so I can make this whole breakup a lot easier. I'm like, yeah, I'll set your ex-girlfriend up with somebody else, like whatever it takes. And the night of 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11, there's a little blip on the news. And it's like, hey, something's happening over here in Benghazi. And I'm like, oh, I don't know where that is. It's not Tripoli. So Glen's cool. But I write him an email. Hey, man, be safe. I don't know what's going on over there. Just be cool. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm going about my day. But it's on the news again. Something's happened over there. Something's happening. And now it's 9/12. And I'm like, all right, shoot him another note, not hearing back from him, which isn't uncommon. He worked long hours. And then I go to the gym and I'm leaving the gym and my phone rings and it's a number I don't recognize. And a little voice in my head said, answer that call.
Yeah.
And I normally don't, but I did. And the voice on the other side said, this is Sean Lake. I said, yeah, I need you to go home immediately to your house. Okay. So I drove home, and sure enough, just like in the movies, there's 2 black SUVs parked directly in front of my home. Now, it's important to note here that I was the executor of Glen's estate. I was Glen's listed next of kin. So the US military, the Central Intelligence Agency, called me because I'm who they were supposed to call. Glen filled out all his paperwork. Shaun deals with everything. That's how we did our lives. Like, I left everything in charge of him. He did everything to me. If I was to die, Glen ran point on all of my stuff, and vice versa. Well, that was that day. And I pull up to my house and I just go, oh shit. And I knew the minute the phone rang, my heart sank, and I was like, oh fuck. And they told me the news, and they told me what they could. You know, Glen died fighting, Glen died saving lives. And I learned so much more since then. But that was the news breaking. Then, you know, they ungated that and they told Barbara, who's Glen's mom. And then there was Dover Air Force Base, and all of a sudden the news cameras are everywhere. And thank God, my girlfriend at the time, was now my wife, Heather, she knew to direct the media around me and keep me out of it. And I just started doing what I was supposed to do. Protect Glen's legacy, celebrate his life, and take that forward. And in a lot of ways, I've been doing that almost for a decade now, 9 years since the Benghazi terrorist attacks. And along the way, there was a congressional hearing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I sat down with Trey Gowdy and Elijah Cummings that headed up the congressional hearing for Benghazi. I'm glad I never met Hillary Clinton. I can say that with a very straight face. And I learned a lot about Glen's heroism and how hard it was for him to get from Tripoli down to Benghazi and join the fight. And I mean, he moved mountains to make that happen. And I just swell up with pride in thinking of Glen calling his bank in the United States to try and wire $40,000 over to some sheik in Tripoli so that Glen can grab his airplane and fly down and join a firefight. I mean, it's urban legend, but it just warms me up to think of him pushing that hard, going against all those orders of, you know, stand down and all that crap, to get in there and do the right thing. And that's Glen doing the right thing. And you know, and I know he got up on that rooftop in Benghazi after he got down there, and he joined his coworker and friend Ty Woods, and they gave it to the enemy really good before they got it. And I'm proud of that. You know, I mean, I wish they never had to be in that situation in the first place, but they were, and their actions saved a lot of American lives, and a lot of people got out alive because of that. And I'm insanely proud of that. And, you know, I mean, that's my buddy. That's the guy who used to razz me if I let his plants die. And, you know, and now here 9 years later, to have a brand that, you know, I was fortunate enough to be a part of this wild ride to get started as a tribute to him and his way of life, these epic things that he stood for, this guy who was the life of the party and would be there for a friend in an emergency right down to the end in Benghazi, who had a movie come out, you know, with Michael Bay, who, you know, should have probably called me and talked to me about it, but
I was gonna say, what did you think of the movie?
So I'll say this to anyone who wants to watch that movie. It is factually correct. Mm-hmm. Like, when I say factually correct, I mean, he did a good job by portraying the characters, not Glen so much, because I don't think anyone could do Glen. We wanted Matt Damon to play Glen, quite frankly. Like, that would have been a good Glen, because he's got the great masshole Massachusetts, you know, vibe that he could have picked up on. But, you know, in a lot of ways, it was easier for me that Glen's character, Bub, in the movie didn't really look or sound like him. He said what Glen would have said, to be clear. They got that part right. The part about it that irked me was, well, there were two things. One, it's funny. I was actually contacted by a rival film company called Relativity Pictures. Relativity was a big movie studio, and we actually agreed to make a movie about Glen in the same year. So this is like 2014, 2 years after Glen passed.
Yeah.
All the energy was buzzing about Benghazi, and everyone wanted a war movie. And so Relativity came at me and they said, hey, we want to write a movie about Glenn, not about Benghazi. That'll be a part of it. But we want to get into Glenn's head. Like, what was he like as a human? What did he suffer from? What was the human side to it? And it was a little bit like an extension of like the American Sniper movie. So there was that approach to it. Well, that's what it took for me to want to play ball. So I actually negotiated a deal, and Dorothy Woods, who was the widow of Tyrone Woods, the other Navy SEAL who was killed over there, we both agreed on that approach, and they, bought into paying for the life rights, and they hired a director like this guy, Dana Brunetti, who did the movie Captain Phillips, was going to lead the whole project. I sat down with him, told him all about Glenn. We were making a movie.
They greenlighted it and everything.
Greenlit. Like, I had a director writing a script. I mean, a writer writing a script, like the whole nine. It was in full motion. And Michael Bay's doing his thing. So there's actually an article you can Google that shows like the rivalry between Michael Bay and Dana Brunetti, who's going to get to the movie first. And you joked about Tombstone earlier. There were two, like Wyatt Earp movie and Tombstone, like which one's going to be the best movie. It was one of those moments. And Relativity files bankruptcy like 2 months into the project. Shits the bed. I get the phone call. Sorry, man. Movie's over. Ain't gonna happen. Have a great life. And that was that. That was my brush with Hollywood, was in that moment.
Yeah.
And then Michael Bay makes his movie. I get invited to go and attend the movie. Now, keep in mind, I've never heard from Michael Bay's team at all during the production until the movie was made. And so I get invited to go to the movie, and it's the premieres in Coronado. My wife is 8 months pregnant. We're about to give birth she's about to give birth to our son. And she's like out to here, right? And we go up and watch the movie. And I'm a little pissed. Like, I think Michael Bay did a shitty job at communicating. And I'm a big kind of old school guy that way. Like, hey man, you could have told us you were doing this. Not that I didn't want money. I didn't want a handout. It's just a gesture. You could have said, hey, we're doing this thing. We want to do it right. Do you want to participate? Do you want to help? Do you want us to interview people?
Give us some insight.
Anything. And that did not happen. I just got invited to the premiere. So we go to the movie. Michael Bay is there. I come up and I meet with him afterwards. And my wife tears him a new asshole. And it was awesome. She just leans into him with her big pregnant belly, and she's like, you might want to think about calling the family of the dead guy you're making a movie about next time, just as a matter of courtesy. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, she said everything I wanted to say, and it sounds way more lethal coming from a pregnant,
I'm picturing you like shrimp cocktail or something, just listening to it.
I couldn't say a thing. I was like, there we go. I think we're going to the exit now. And he actually, to his credit, he was apologetic about it and just moved on with his life. And I'm sure it never really registered, but we said what was the right thing to say, and I'll stand by that. But that was it. Like, then all of a sudden the movie comes out, there's all this buzz, and then it kind of settles down. We'd started a foundation after Glenn passed, the Glen Doherty Memorial Foundation. It's thriving and doing its thing today. It's small, but it's impactful, offering scholarships to special operators and their families in that transition out of active duty. And being a part of that was incredibly warming to me to kind of continue Glenn's legacy.
Yeah.
And then there was the Bubs brand, that kind of the best happy accident I could ask for, aside from meeting my wife.
Yeah. Well, just for the record, now that I have done what any good host does, see how you feel about something, then respond to it. I'm not a big Michael Bay fan, so at least I can get that out there right now. Anybody that knows me and talk movies knows I'm not a fan of his, but that's neither here nor there. But let's talk about Bubs. Let's talk about the genesis of it and how you got it started. Like I said, I think the products are amazing. So tell our listeners out there that they've never heard about Bubs Naturals. How did you get started, and what is it? Where can they find it?
All right, so no problem. So I'll set the stage here real quick. My wife is 14 years younger than I am. When I was 45 years old, she was 31, and we had just had our first child, right? So this is about a year after the whole Michael Bay fuck you thing. Yeah. And she comes home with a jar of collagen. And she's like, I want you to start taking this. You're not getting any younger, and I need to preserve your old ass. I'm like, whoa, babe, what are you saying here?
He's
She's like,
honest.
look, we're starting a family and I got to preserve you. And you should know this about me. I've been super active, running, mountain biking, surfing, swimming, CrossFit, like all the things. And I'm very committed to that fitness because I want to stay active and maintain a high level of activity. Like that's how we should all live, I believe. So I start taking the collagen purely because my wife tells me to. And I read the jar and it says hair, skin, nails, great for joint health, muscle recovery, gut health. Like it's like a laundry list of things. And I'm like, if
Yeah.
this does half of that shit, I'll be impressed. 3 weeks into taking it, I take it every day. I put a scoop in my coffee every morning. And 3 weeks in, I'm like, where are the nail clippers? My fingernails are growing like crazy. I'm like, that's a data point. I don't know, like a week later, I needed a haircut. We were going to a wedding and I'm like, I just got a haircut. I need another haircut. What the hell's happening to me? And it was about 2 months in when I'll never forget. I jumped up out of bed, packed up the family. We had to fly to Boston. I'm sitting in a cramped up little seat. We get off the airplane. And if you've ever traveled with a small child, you know that you're traveling with endless amounts of bags and crap to keep that small human happy.
Boys.
And dude, so we get off the plane and I turn to my wife. I'm like, oh my God, nothing hurts. And she's like, oh, that's nice, dear. I'm like, no. You don't understand. Like, I feel great. We just flew across country. I'm 6'2". Like, I should be completely cramped up right now and I feel awesome. What the hell is in that collagen stuff? And that started my journey of like learning about it. I didn't know what an amino acid was. I mean, I knew what an amino acid was, but I didn't know what it did for you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that glycine was this magical amino acid loaded in collagen that not only promotes great recovery, but produces synovial fluid. The synovial fluid lubricates the joints. That creates cushioning. That is where all that impact stuff that I participate in needed help. And a couple more months goes by and I just feel better and better and better. I'm like, man, I feel like I just got 10 years back in my life. I just Benjamin Buttoned my ass. And a buddy of mine, TJ Ferreira, comes over to the house. We were sharing a couple of work projects, always kind of ideating on stuff. And, you know, we did some gym stuff together. And he sees the jar of collagen. He looks at me and he goes, you take that stuff? And I start raving to him, just like I just told you. I'm like,
Yeah.
It's the best thing ever. It's changed my life. And he just goes, well, let's start a company. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I got a 1-year-old crawling behind me. I'm not so sure about this whole start a company thing, but hey, we're sitting here sipping coffee. So let's have that conversation. Anyway, so what would a company look like? And we both looked at each other, and for very different reasons, we both said, well, whatever we do, we have to do something cool for charity. And I just looked at him and laughed. I said, well, I know the charity. It's got to be Glen's charity. And Glen's call sign in the Navy was Bub. So I named the company Bubs Naturals as a tribute to Glen and his way of life. Every product we make will stand for self-improvement. Everything we make will be designed to make you a better human, just like Glen was. And will always help others through giving 10% of all profits to charity, just like Glen was helping others right to the very end.
That's awesome.
And it just felt right for both of us. And we looked at that and we took that out and we asked Glen's former teammates and we asked Glen's family, and everyone came back and said the exact same thing. Glen would kick your ass if you don't do this. And all of a sudden, this little coffee conversation became, all right, how much money do you have in your savings account? How much does it cost to start a company? Like, let's write a very rough business plan.
Yeah.
And let's start this adventure. And now here we are 4 years later.
Like I said, it's amazing product. I love, it's become part of my daily routine now. And I got my wife on board with it as well. So loving it. Definitely telling everybody out there, go check it out. We'll get to the link in just a minute. What was one of the biggest hurdles you had with starting your own company?
I think quality. When you're starting a company named after your dead best friend, your fallen best friend, I didn't want to just put any old cow powder in the jar. I wanted to make sure we found the absolute best in quality collagen.
Yeah.
We got really lucky in that regard, but that was a hurdle. I'd say the number 2 thing was our number 1 rule: never run out of inventory. And we learned that by running out of inventory.
Yeah.
So you better get real good at your demand plan real quick to navigate that. And that was a learning curve. So tons of learning curves. But this was a brand new industry. I'd never been in the dietary supplement space before. I didn't know anything about the rules or regulations. I had to learn all that like right along the way.
Well, tell our like non-Shark Tank entrepreneur listeners, like what's the importance of not having enough product when it's just demand, demand, demand.
Oh, so when we turned it on, like this was really a social experiment. Like we weren't pinning our fortunes on Bubs Naturals and saying this is our next big thing. It was really like kind of side hustle. Like, do you think anyone cares about a charitable brand? Like it felt right in our hearts. But we ran out of product, which means you're not selling anything, which means all the work that you just did to build momentum, to tell the story, to get people engaged goes away. And you got to start over again. And that's really fucking frustrating. And you put in a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of energy. You don't want that to happen. You want to continue to build that momentum. And you learn very quickly to always have a low water mark and to find out where your sweet spot is for manufacturing and to map that out over time so that you write the purchase order at the right time to get the next amount of product in and just, set up a system that's going to work. And there's MBAs and business schools and smarter people than myself that do all that.
Yeah. And one thing I love, I mentioned the apple cider gummies. I've been taking apple cider shots for a long time. I had been
brutal.
Yeah. And it really is. And then nobody wants to get within 15 feet of you. And then there's other brands that have apple cider gummies and pills and all this other stuff, but yours taste amazing. Like,
well,
it has to be like one of the best things people compliment you on is those apple cider gummies.
It is. And that's how people kind of are. Like I was looking at apple cider and I'm like, how do we differentiate from, quite frankly, the main brands that are out there making apple cider vinegar? Because we're not the biggest one. I'm like, they kind of taste like shit, just like apple cider vinegar does not taste good. Let's improve on that. Let's deliver the exact same benefits. Let's make sure it's there. Like you can't hide the vinegar.
Yeah.
Don't hide it, but round it out. Like does a little bit of B12 help with that? Like, like what are the ways that you can evolve that and just make them taste good? So removing barriers to entry is super important. Making things flavorful or flavorless is important. Like collagen, no one wants to taste a cow's hide. No one.
Yeah.
But you want the benefits attached to that cow powder because collagen, just for those listeners, you're either getting a gelatin based or it's coming from the hide of the cow. We prefer the hide because it's got a higher, richer amino acid profile and it's gentler on the stomach. That's where your premium stuff comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to do that well. So I want you to be able to put it in your coffee and enjoy your coffee. If you put in a smoothie, I don't want you to taste it. If you cook your rice or your, soups, throw it right in there. It's heat tolerant, but remove barriers to entry.
Yeah. And I think you had said before, like you can even, sneak it into some kids' food there. It's not flavored. I wouldn't want like a pineapple flavored collagen. I like that I can.
No, they're out there. You can find one. There's literally a pineapple collagen on the market.
Yep. I saw it at GNC and that's why I was just like, nope. I like like you have unflavored. You can put it in coffee. You can put it in pre-workout. You can put it in BCAAs. You can put it in anything. And it's amazing. And like I said, huge fan of your product. And if people want to find out, well, not find out more, if they want to go out and purchase themselves some Bubs Naturals, where can you send them to?
So our website, number one, bubsnaturals.com. So it's BUBSNATURALS.com. And then we're on Amazon, Amazon's Choice, Amazon Prime, all the Amazon things. But our websites, just come on in, learn more about the story, learn about these benefits and what we're all about. And then all of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, the Twitters, the Snaps, all that is at Bubs Naturals. Yeah, I'm a huge MySpace guy. I don't know what my top 8 is anymore. I got to probably refresh that.
Well, folks, I'm serious. Go check them out. One last question about Bubs. The colors, is there any meaning behind the colors that y'all chose for it?
So it's very interesting. I'm a fan of psychology of color.
Yeah.
So, the idea of blue and being tried true and blue, trustworthiness, the warmth of an orange, like a warm color that invites a call to action, the stability of black, those were all strategic. I didn't some people joke with me. They're like, "Oh, look how it looks in the Miami Dolphins." I'm like, I'm a New England Patriots fan. Don't ever say that to me.
Yeah.
However, the scheme behind the colors had to make sense. So when we were briefing the brand, I matched the colors to Glen's DNA. I kind of matched them to who he was as a person and these things that would invite people to want to participate. And that's really what this is. Like Bubs, it's a brand. We sell a product, but it's a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's bringing people together and with a shared thirst for adventure. And that's really what we're all about. Like, I'm giving you better tools to go and have those adventures. And we're here to have that conversation and sharing that journey.
I like it. It's got his footprint like all over it, from the colors.
Yeah,
and
man,
everything.
It's fun stuff.
That's really cool. And to find out more about his foundation, where can you point him to?
Yeah, so go over to Glen Doherty Foundation.org, the Glen Doherty Memorial Foundation, and learn about it. I mean, it's pretty neat. Like, there's a great bio page on there where you learn about some of the scholar recipients. You just learn more about what it feels like to help others, and it's a real easy organization to be a part of. Again, it's smaller, but it's impactful, man. Like, knowing that you're really touching someone's life and helping them make that successful transition out of active duty to civilian life, and just giving them those tools, that's where the good stuff is, helping others.
You say it's smaller, but it's doing big things. So
it is. Yeah.
And final question for you. What do you want your legacy to be? You know, I asked you the one about the time capsule, but when people mention your name 50 years from now, other than you and your wife let Michael Bay have an earful, what do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, if people think that I was out there being of service, that's all I would care about. And that could be taken any way. It could be helping the neighbors out when they had to move a couch. It could be doing something substantial with charitable giving. It could be making sure my kids turn into good humans. If I was of good service and that was recognized, then I did something right.
That's awesome. What final comments do you have for our listeners?
God, I don't know. I feel like you just extracted a whole lifetime of stuff out of me. So no, go out there and try new things. That's what I would say to people. Go out there and have a new adventure or revisit old adventures. Yeah. It doesn't really matter, but I'm a big fan of being active. And I think your best life is one where you're challenging yourself. And that could be revisiting old. It could be trying something new. But, I'm not a fan of complacency. I'm definitely a fan of adventure in some form or another. My current adventure is parenting. But go out there and find out what you're made of.
Yeah, I've definitely have picked up on that from hearing your journey. Is just go out, try new things, even get away from your comfort zone and step out and just see what life offers you. So,
amen.
Sir, thank you so much. We will have in the links, we will have all the info that we've talked about here in the episode description. So make sure you go give them some love. Check out their products. I'm telling you, you're going to love them. Folks, that is all the time we have on the Shadows Podcast.